guys, welcome back to the Adventures of Cosmic. I'm Cosmic, and today we are doing another episode of Deadly Intentions. What? No way. I'm just joking around with you guys. Obviously, we got the email that I sent Leanne Dobbs. I don't know why I call her Lillian. That's weird. I'm sorry. Leanne Dobbs. Up here. And now I'm going to switch it over to our lovely notes. Okay?
Chapter 28. Need some help?
No, not Overton.
Smirked at her,
Oh,
a toothpick bobbing up and down between his teeth. Not from you, Morgan shouted up at him. Beside her, Jolene glanced up, a frown creasing her face when she realized who Morgan was talking to. Look out! Morgan shrieked, pointing to a guard who decided to take advantage of Jolene's distraction by aiming at an unprotected blind spot with his dark energy gun. Jolene moved the amulet to protect herself while aiming a sizzling gold energy spark at the guard. I don't think you are in any position to argue, Overton pointed out.
Unfortunately.
I can get you out of here. Morgan stared in wonder as a rope ladder dropped down from above them. Her eyes ping-ponged between Overton and the guards, who seemed to have gained a few inches in the battle. Her sisters stole quick, nervous glances at her. Looks like she'd have to choose between two evils. Her gut instinct told her to go up the rope, especially since it was looking like it was either that or die at the bottom of the hole. We have to go up, Morgan yelled for the others' attention, pointing at the rope. They nodded, backing up while continuing to fight off the guards. Morgan didn't have to use her intuitive gifts to see this wasn't going to work. Once they took their attention away from fighting the guards to climb the rope, the guards would just rush right in. As if reading her mind, Fiona raised her hand with the last red crystal. Looks like it's a good time to use this, she said, and launched it toward the opening. Her aim was perfect. The energy knocked down the guards, but the best part was that it also dislodged the rocks from the top of the opening, temporarily closing it in. Let's go. Morgan could hear the guards already trying to dig out the opening to get to them, as Mateo scooped Joanna up in his arms and scurried up the ladder. She shooed her sisters up, and then Luke made her follow them before he, Buzz, Jake, and Cal climbed up themselves, pulling the ladder up with them. From the top, Morgan glanced through the hole to the rocks below, her heart twisting as she looked at what was left of Eliza. Then Overton slid the cover back in place, and they all stood there, staring at each other. Morgan glanced around the small room. Lengths of different-sized pipes ran along the perimeter, leading out of the room at all angles. She guessed it was some sort of service room for the piping that fed into the facility up above. Her gut flooded with a sense of urgency as she heard the guards yelling below. They must have broken through the debris caused by Fiona's crystal and were in the room. They wouldn't be able to climb up without a ladder, but surely they would know another route to get to the room they were in. She guessed they didn't have long before Bly and his minions were breaking down the door. Sheriff Overton looked different without his brown sheriff's uniform. He wore a stained white t-shirt over tan slacks. The t-shirt was a little tight, bringing unwanted attention to his overstuffed belly.
Blech.
He hitched up his pants, switching the toothpick from one side of his mouth to the other. Well, I didn't expect to see you girls again so soon. His smug gaze drifted from one girl to another. What do you want? Jake cut in. I'm sure you didn't pull us out of there out of the kindness of your heart, so let's just get down to business. You always were uppity. Overton said to Jake. But you're right. It seems like you have something I want, and I have something you want. What could you possibly have that we want? Jolene stood protectively in front of Joanna, who leaned against Mateo on one side and a section of pipe on the other. I have a boat that can get you people out of here. Overton's lips curled in a mean smile, and he nodded to a man who had been standing unobtrusively next to some sort of hatch. The man pushed the hatch open, and Morgan leaned over to see a steep ramp leading down to a good-sized boat. We have our own boat, Morgan crossed her arms over her chest, and rafts to take us to it. I don't think so. Overton pointed to another hatch, which was opened by another of his minions. Morgan's heart sank when she looked out to see the remains of their rafts, deflated on the rocks. You didn't.
You did.
Overton shrugged, switching the toothpick around in his mouth. Better hurry up and make your decision. It won't take long for them to find us here. Another explosion rocked the floor, and Morgan thought she heard voices outside the room. Luke looked around at all of them, each giving a nod of the head. So, you'll take us to our boat? Luke asked. Yup. And what do you want in return? Fiona narrowed her eyes at Overton. He leaned forward, his beady eyes drilling into hers. She shrank back as he reached toward her, grasping the meteorite locket in his hand and holding it up between them. This fancy locket and asylum. Asylum? From what? Luke asked. Overton dropped the locket and stepped back. I've been pursued by both sides of the paranormal community. Goldlinger is after me because of my little, indiscretion regarding your treasure. And, well, you goody two-shoes people have always hated me. Hated you? You're the one that harassed us, Jolene said. Overton shrugged. That was just business. And obviously, you girls have a lot of clout. And now that you have your mother back, I want you to get the community to promise to protect me from Goldlinger and Bly. Jake snorted. It looks like you're in pretty good with them. After all, you are inside Bly's complex. I think this is some sort of trick. Inside the underground sewer system, not the main complex.
Can we quit arguing?
Overton spread his hands at his sides. If Bly finds me in here, I'm as dead as you are. Jake narrowed his eyes at Overton. Then, how did you get in the first place?
Fair.
Overton smirked.
Fair question.
I still have my contacts in the organization, and it turns out contacts will do lots of things for money. They got me in, but we better get out while the getting's good. Morgan stared at Overton, wondering where he'd gotten money to pay anyone off. Had he nabbed some of the treasure from their house?
No.
She didn't see how it was possible.
He fell in the pit, remember?
For all she knew, he'd never been inside, but maybe he'd been up to things she didn't know about. We aren't part of any community, Fiona said. And even if we were, we certainly don't have any influence to get anyone to promise to protect you. I do. Mateo spoke from the corner where he'd been leaning against the pipes with Joanna. Everyone swiveled their heads to look at him. What are you talking about? Jolene asked. Mateo glanced uneasily out the door. Were the guards out in the hall? I can explain later, but for now, we need to hurry. I say we take him up on it. Mateo's face turned grim. It looks like it's our only chance. The girls glanced at each other, then at Joanna, who nodded. Okay, but I don't trust him. Fiona reluctantly handed the locket to Overton. Overton took the locket with a smirk and nodded to the man who opened the hatch. After you. Overton gestured toward the hatch. Morgan still had her reservations. She hesitated, not sure if they should really trust Overton. But before she could think more about it, the sound of something heavy battering the door to the room, jolted her into action. Mateo swooped Joanna up in his arms, and they all ran for the boat. It turned out that Overton could be trusted, at least long enough to take them to their boat that was waiting several miles away. Apparently, Bly had been too busy trying to put his eye back in the socket and never even suspected they were escaping. They were able to make a clean getaway. Still, Morgan didn't let her guard down until they were all safely ensconced on the boat, watching Overton's boat disappear into the horizon. "I can't believe he didn't double-cross us somehow," she murmured, as she watched the moonlight dance across the tops of the waves from the cabin window. "There's still time for that." Jolene slid along the bench seat to sit next to Joanna. Joanna looked tired. Morgan's heart pinched at how she'd aged. But when her mother looked up at her and smiled, warmth flooded her chest. "He won't double-cross you. He needs you too much now." Mateo brushed his hand through his dark brown curls, and Morgan's mind whirled with all the questions she wanted to ask. What was Mateo even doing there? What had happened to Jolene inside that compound? And last but not least, where in the world had her mother been all these years? And why hadn't she contacted them? Before she could ask any of the questions, Luke appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the door jamb, his broad shoulders spanning most of the opening, and asked the question for her. "Does anyone want to tell us what the heck was going on in there?" Epilogue. Jolene stood, hands on hips, in the east sitting room, staring at the TV. In world news tonight, alternative energy expert Dr. Mortimer Bly's Caribbean compound on Fury Rock suffered massive explosions. The television screen flashed various aerial view pictures of damage to the research complex. Dr. Bly said the explosion was related to a new alternative energy he's researching. The television switched to a film clip of Bly talking. Jolene almost laughed when she saw the big patch on his eye. Bly himself was injured, saving his research notes, but everyone else escaped with only minor injuries. He will rebuild and continue his research. Jolene snapped the TV off and turned to face the others. "Can you believe that?" "He has the perfect cover," Morgan said, from her place on the couch, in between Fiona and Celeste. "The world will probably never know what his real motive is, but we do," Joanna said softly, from the overstuffed chair she'd been tucked into, a fuzzy white blanket wrapped around her, despite the warm summer evening. She was still weak, but managed a radiant smile as she sipped a cup of tea. Belladonna, who had ignored all four sisters and gone straight to Joanna upon their arrival home, purred contentedly in her lap. In the 2 days that they'd had their mother home, she'd improved immensely. Her skin was losing its deathly pallor, and she'd even been able to walk a few steps on her own without the wheelchair they'd rented to help her get around. Would she ever get back to her old self? Jolene had no idea, but it didn't matter. She was glad to have her mother back home in any capacity. "I'm just glad we got out of there in one piece," Fiona said. "Yeah, but I wonder about Overton. I still don't trust him, and now he has that locket," Morgan said. "What do you think he plans to do with it?" Jolene shrugged. "Who knows? Maybe build his own paranormal army?" "I hope not," Celeste said. "You guys never located the woman who brought it to your shop?" Fiona shook her head. "Nope. I guess she's another mystery." "Maybe she was part of this paranormal community and brought it to you on purpose," Celeste suggested. "Maybe. I guess there was a lot going on in the paranormal community that no one told us about, Morgan bristled. Because you weren't ready, Mateo said. Actually, we didn't even know there was a paranormal community, Celeste chimed in. Yeah, but now I guess we're part of it, whatever that means. Morgan pressed her lips together. And what do Dorian Hall and the government have to do with all this?
Good question.
Fiona
We're
scrunched
not
her
sure
face
yet.
up at Luke. Luke shrugged. She's pretty tight-lipped, but the government has a vested interest in making sure Bly doesn't gain any more power. Apparently, she knew that you girls would eventually be able to help her. I think that's why she hired me. She knew I could get close to you because of my relationship with Morgan. So, you didn't get fired? Luke laughed. No. I kind of think she actually wanted us to go there. She just didn't want to give the order officially. You'd think she could have warned us before all of this started, so we could have been honing our skills, Celeste said. You know the government. They like to keep people in the dark. That's for sure, Cal said, and everyone chuckled. Celeste turned to her younger sister. Well, Jolene, it turned out your instincts about something not being right with the investigation into Mom's death was spot on.
Yeah, no
I'll
kidding.
say, Joanna chimed in, setting off another round of laughter. Jolene's heart squeezed, thinking about what her mother had suffered at the hands of Bly, and she'd submitted to it in order to keep them safe. But she did feel a little bit of satisfaction in knowing that she'd been right to be suspicious about Joanna's death. Maybe Morgan wasn't the only one with intuitive gifts. Yep, she said. Turns out that photo I found in Barnes's storage unit was actually a photo of Mom being grabbed from the cliff the day she supposedly died. She never jumped off. She was kidnapped, and they paid off Earl Whiting to say he saw her jump. Wait, Celeste lifted a brow at her. You went to the storage unit alone? Jolene grimaced.
Yeah.
She hadn't told anyone about her trip to the storage unit.
She was saved by Mateo.
Yeah, I guess I probably shouldn't have done that. But at least I didn't get captured there. No, but you almost were, Mateo cut in. Jolene blinked at him. How did you know that? Who do you think got you out of it? He winked at her.
Cute.
Oh, Jolene chewed her bottom lip. So, she really had seen Mateo in town.
So cute.
He had been looking out for her, after all. Thanks, she said. I still don't get how they could have grabbed me, though. They used some kind of weird rock. It looked like a geode, but it made me terribly weak. I couldn't fight back. And what happened to that picture, anyway? The geode is something we need to be careful of. Bly had them specially fitted to sap all your energy. The problem is they're kind of bulky, so we can't use them everywhere. But for trying to capture someone, they work pretty well. Mateo turned to Jolene. As you found out
the hard way.
As far as the picture goes, well, let's just say if one of those guys has it, he won't be showing it to anyone. Ever. Morgan raised a brow at Mateo, then looked down at the obsidian amulet. I wonder if these amulets would counteract the geode.
No.
Mateo pressed his lips together. I'm not sure. The amulets absorb energy, right? Morgan nodded. The geodes suck out energy, so the amulet probably wouldn't counteract them. Good point, Jolene said, then narrowed her eyes at Mateo. So, if you stopped them from grabbing me at the storage unit, how come you let them grab me at the college? Mateo's eyes flashed. I can't be everywhere. Watching over you is like a full-time job. The day you were snatched, I was on Fury Rock with Bly. I'd infiltrated it about a year ago to try to get Joanna out, so I couldn't spend too much time away from there. Joanna smiled at Mateo. It made my life a lot easier. Morgan turned to her mother. Mom, I don't understand why you never contacted us. Joanna's eyes clouded. It tore me up not to, but I couldn't. It was too dangerous. I knew your gifts would get more powerful, and I couldn't risk bringing Bly's attention to you. Once he kidnapped me, I realized it was better for you girls if I just submitted to what he wanted instead of fighting him off. Of course, little did I know he was already watching you, and when my power dried up, he came for you anyway. But by then, I was too weak to fight. Jolene's heart twisted, and she shot Morgan an angry glance. Of course you were, Mom. We know you did what you did for us. I did send one little message, though. Joanna reached into her pocket and took out 2 tiny heart-shaped pictures, the exact size of the locket Jolene wore on her neck. Jolene gasped, and her hands went up to the necklace. You mean this really is your locket? Joanna nodded, and Jolene remembered how Mateo had ripped it from her throat, and then how the mysterious black cat had returned it with the vial of the red liquid. She turned to Mateo. You took the locket, but how did you... Mateo shook his head, cutting her off. I have my ways. So, all that time, he was draining your energy to make it into some kind of elixir that his minions would drink? Jake asked Joanna. Yep, and that's what he had in store for Jolene, too. But now he has no one. Or at least, not that we know of, Mateo said. I guess that's one thing in our favor, Morgan added. He won't be able to use any elixirs to boost the power of his underlings. And meanwhile, we're getting stronger. But what about that guy, Barnes? Celeste asked. Did his boat blowing up have anything to do with this? As a matter of fact, it did. And it helped us solve a case, Jake answered. Bly doesn't like to get his hands dirty, so it seems. He had a small-time crook, Edwin James, grab Joanna from the cliff. That figures, Luke said. Most of the bigwigs hire others to do the dirty work. Jake nodded. The no-quit police brought James in, and my sources tell me it was pretty easy to get him to spill his guts. Apparently, Barnes was out fishing the night Joanna got grabbed. He took the photo from his fishing boat and was blackmailing James with it. Poor Barnes only got one payment, though, before James killed him and dumped him in the ocean. His boat was supposed to be blown up back then, but somehow that didn't happen until James went back to cover his tracks recently. Somehow, Barnes's bones made their way into Jeb's lobster traps. Jeb's cousin was actually the one to find them. He's kind of shady and has apparently been pilfering Jeb's traps for years. Except this time, instead of lobsters, he got human bones. Word travels fast across the criminal element in this town. And somehow, James found out and went and cut the trap lines so no one would pull up more of Barnes's bones. Then, he must have gone back and blown up the boat. But why go to all that trouble now? Celeste asked. That all happened 7 years ago. Apparently, James was scared stiff of Bly finding out he screwed up by having a witness to Joanna's abduction, and was afraid of what Bly would do to him if he found out. He was afraid Barnes's bones, surfacing now, would launch an investigation, and it would all come out. That's why he talked to the police. He's so scared of Bly that he gave up the information as a trade for protection. And it almost worked, Cal said. Except he missed one bone. Yep, Jake nodded. The one Jeb found in his lobster trap. So, the whole thing with his traps had nothing to do with Gordy Ellis and the feud? Fiona asked. Nope. I already talked to them, and they shook hands and buried the hatchet on that old family feud. Hopefully, for good. Wow, that's great news. And I also solved another case, too, Jolene smiled. That's why I was at the college. Gail was taking cooking lessons, not having an affair.
Oh,
She
God.
wanted it to be a surprise for Steve, which explains all the secrecy. She confessed, and they're happier than 2 clams in a clamshell, and eating much better, too. Everyone laughed. Then Celeste's face turned serious. She turned to Jolene. So, what exactly happened to you in Bly's compound? Jolene told them about herself and how she thought Mateo was one of Bly's minions up until the very end. She described the chair and how Bly wanted to make the elixir from her paranormal powers. She left out the part about the black cat and her locket, but finished up by describing how Mateo had tricked Bly by monkeying with the chair so they could incapacitate Bly and grab Joanna to make their escape. And that's when we met up with you guys in the tunnels, Jolene said to her sisters, then narrowed her eyes at Luke. But where were you then? We only ran into Eliza, Morgan, Fiona, and Celeste. You guys weren't there. Luke told her about the energy shield and how they'd gotten separated. We didn't know where the girls had gone, so we figured the best way to find out was to get one of us captured and hope that Bly would lead us to you. Then the others would follow and jump out to help at the right time. Wow, that was pretty dangerous. Morgan's eyes softened as she looked at Luke. You could have ended up like Eliza. Jolene's heart pinched, thinking about her aunt. I wish we could have gotten to know her better. She was wonderful, Joanna said. We were very close at one time. Everyone thought she left Noquit because she was bored here, but that wasn't true. She had to leave because there was so much paranormal power here between your father, her, and me that it would have attracted a lot of attention. We felt it was safer for you girls if she left. She gave up her home, and we should never forget that she did that for us. Jolene ran over and hugged Joanna. We won't, Mom. But I think I speak for everyone when I say the most important thing is that we have you home with us. Let's just chill out and enjoy that, and work on getting you better. That would be lovely, dear, Joanna said.
Sorry, guys.
Her voice was light,
Tear.
but by the way she
This is
looked
a
out the window
tearjerker.
toward the dark wooded area at the edge of their property, Jolene could tell her mother was wondering the same thing she was. How long would it be before Bly struck again? The old woman stood just inside the thickly wooded edge of the Blackmore property, looking toward the house, her face hidden by the wide hood of the black cloak she wore. At her feet, a jet-black cat with ice-blue eyes lazily washed its face. From her vantage point, she could see the figures of the Blackmore family and friends gathered in one room. Her keen ears could hear the murmur of conversation and occasional outburst of laughter, but she couldn't make out the words that were being said. A smile played along her lips as she watched from her hiding spot. All was as it should be, at least for now. She'd done her part, and now, maybe, her weary old bones could rest. She turned and faded into the darkness of the woods, the cat following along closely behind her. 10 days later. Jolene sat on the porch, looking down at the lavender-colored envelope she held in her hands. It was addressed to her and her sisters, and even though it had no return address, she knew who it was from. Tears stung the backs of her eyes as she rocked back and forth in the white wicker chair, taking care not to knock over the bottle of beer that sat next to her bare feet. A cool breeze fluttered across the back of her neck, giving her a moment of relief from the hot summer day. She tapped the edge of the envelope against her lips. Should she open it before her sisters came home? Her curiosity won out. She slid a fingernail under the flap. The scent of lavender wafted out, and she closed her eyes before taking out the neatly penned letter. A single tear slid down her cheek as she read, "Dear girls, if you are reading this now, it means I'm dead. Please don't be sad. It was all for a good cause. Just know that I always loved you girls, and that's why I did what I did. I'm sorry we won't get to know each other better, and even though we can't talk to one another, I'll still be around in spirit. You girls have an important job ahead of you now. The future rests on your shoulders, and you must pick up where I left off. Enclosed, you will find a map that may aid you in beating Bly to one of the relics that he desperately desires. It's up to you girls to carry on our cause. Yours, Eliza." A piece of paper that had been folded up inside the letter fluttered to the ground, and Jolene bent to pick it up. It was a map, but not of any place that she recognized. She turned it over, but the other side was blank. Pressing her lips together, she reread Eliza's letter. There was no indication what exactly it was a map to. She sat back in the chair and took a sip of the beer. A purple dragonfly landed on the arm of her chair, and she stared at it, mesmerized. She'd seen lots of dragonflies before, but never a purple one. She sipped the beer and contemplated the map. She and her sisters would have to figure out what the map was for, of course. She wasn't about to let Bly get any of the relics he wanted. With a sigh, she folded the letter back into the envelope and got up from the chair. Her sisters would be home in a few hours. She'd show the letter to them then. In the meantime, she'd get on the computer and see if she could figure out what that map was to. Maybe, by the time they got home, she'd be able to give them a destination for their next adventure. The end. This has been Deadly Intentions, Blackmore Sisters Cozy Mystery Series, Volume 5. Written by Leanne Dobbs. Narrated by Hollis McCarthy. Produced by StarCloud Audio. Copyright 2014 through 2015 by Lee Dobbins. Production copyright 2015 by Lee Dobbins.
Well, okay, guys, that was Deadly Intention. Next one is the one and only Great Mistake. What? So I will see you guys in Great Mistake. Have fun. Enjoy your day. If it's snowing outside, go play in the snow. And if you're not an outdoor person, make yourself a cup of hot chocolate and grab a snack. I will see you guys next time. Bye.